You're listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which provides bite-sized tips for busy parents, educators, and anyone working with kids. These real talk conversations focus on mindful living, mental health, and personal growth, helping all to learn, grow, and inspire with mindfulness in mind. I'm your host, Vanessa de Jesus Guzman, educator, licensed professional counselor, entrepreneur, and mom. I'm passionate about helping folks live life with peace of mind and ease of heart while not losing their, well, you know, here we go. Hello, and welcome to episode 112 of the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So if you notice the title of today's podcast, it's called Not All Hours Are Created Equal. And people say time is money and time is the most valuable resource. And once it's gone, you can't get it back. So because of all that, before we even did into the topic, I just wanted to take out a moment to say thank you for taking out your time to listen to the podcast. I know they're short and they're bite-sized, intentionally bite-sized, but I do appreciate having your support. And if you haven't done so already, if you could just take out a moment of your time to rate and review the podcast, that would be so greatly appreciated because it really does help other people find the podcast more. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And now let's go back to talking about time. So this past Sunday in the United States, we had daylight savings time. So I don't know if that's daylight savings time or if it's something else. I really don't know. But what I do know is that we fall back and we spring forward. And I believe that this is the last time we're doing it or second to last time. Obviously, I have to get my facts straight, but I know that we gained an hour because we turned our clocks back, meaning that we got an extra hour of blank. And that's kind of what I wanted to chat with you about today, regardless of when you're listening to this. So some people say that all of us have the same 24 hours. It all depends what we do with it. And I highly, and I mean highly, like in caps and in bold, I highly disagree. Because yes, we all have 24 hours in a day, but we don't all have the same 24 hours. Because it's very different if you hop in your car and can make it to work in 20 to 30 minutes. It's very different than if you don't have access to a car and if you have to jump on a train or on a bus and get to work in about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes because you don't have access to a car. It's also very different for those who are privileged, for the rich and famous or Hollywood who have nannies or personal chefs, or even somebody to clean your home, which I mean that some of us everyday people can afford perhaps, but it's very different if you have to take out 3 hours on a Saturday morning, because that's the way I was raised, to clean your house then if you are out at work and come back to find the house already clean because you have the privilege or the time and the resources to have someone come to your house and do it then. So when I think about even my own schedule, I mean, if I had someone come clean my home, do my laundry, no, not even do my laundry. I could do that. Put my laundry away. That's the tricky part. And I think some of you might understand where I'm going with this. I mean, that is time that's spent, right? Like just putting laundry away or cleaning, as I said, on a Saturday morning. If I had someone edit these podcasts and do my marketing, I would have, I mean, maybe like an extra 10 hours a week because really that's how long it takes to have everything happen behind the scenes. So when we have help, that can be huge in some cases. And the question is, what are you doing with the time that you have? Because sometimes we do have that help, but then when we don't, what are we doing with it to make it work best in our favor? Because it's really easy sometimes to just sit and say, I wish I had this, or I wish I had that, or they're so lucky because they have A, B, and C, and 1, 2, 3. But instead of using that time to do that, and if we instead put some action behind our thoughts, things would perhaps have a very different turnout. So again, we all have 24 hours in a day, but not all 24 hours are created equally. And when we think about the concept of time in actual real time, being that it's beginning of November right now, take a moment to think about, how are you winding down the year? How has 2022 been going for you if you're listening to real time? If not, whatever the time span is, how has this week, this month, this year, how has it been going for you? Is it going the way you wanted it to go? Think about at the beginning of perhaps your day, your week, your year, in this case, 2022. So many of us engage in making New Year's resolutions or goals or intentions. And sometimes we have so much motivation when that first happens. And then somewhere along the way, some sooner than others, we lose it or we forget about it. So when we think of November 2022 compared to January, have you come closer to reaching these goals or intentions that you set for yourself? And if not, what happened? And what could you do differently? And these are a lot of questions that are not meant to really be rhetorical questions. They're actually meant for you to reflect on them. And sometimes it's worth it to perhaps listen to this podcast again, put it on pause, and have these as journal entries. And it doesn't have to mean that you have a diary like Dear Diary, November blank, 2022, right? But you can take out a moment at any time. It doesn't have to be anything consistent. And just write down your thoughts and think about, again, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how are you going to use the aspect of time for it to be on your side? Just recently, after a conversation with my own therapist, she suggested that I write down everything I do for my business because that is where most of my time goes. So I color coded and I have like my personal calendar, my family calendar, and then my business calendar. And it was insane first to see all the colors, right? All the things. But it became really clear to me as far as how much time I spend on things and how sometimes the time that I'm spending, the time that I'm just giving away, if we think about it in that sense, would you stand outside your window and just let money fly out the window? Sometimes with our time, that's exactly what we do. And in my own life, this has been a really big theme, which is why I just did that calendar project or activity. And what I figured out for myself is that I have to become more intentional. And I've slowly been taking steps to do that. I have to become more intentional of where I'm spending my time, how I'm spending my time, and is it best serving me and my goals? Sometimes when we think specifically about the area of excelling in career, so to speak, especially in your early 20s, there's this hustle mentality of work, work, work. And I've been there. I mean, I've held 3 to 4 jobs at one time, and it's challenging. And it literally sucked the life out of me and put a whole lot of pounds on places that they really shouldn't have been. But now that I have chosen to be more intentional, I do spend more time doing the things that suit me, and I have to get better at doing that. So just recently, I've stepped down from 2 professional organizations that I was on because while I believe in the cause, my time just doesn't allow me to be effective in the organization. And it takes time away from pockets where I would like to focus more energy on. And that's a perfect combination when you feel that you want to put more time in something, but you have this other thing taking it away or you're giving it away. It's a perfect combination to, one, become ineffective, two, to get down on yourself because you're not doing good here nor there. And then the third, which is sometimes the scariest, is becoming resentful at other people or at an organization, or maybe even towards yourself because you perhaps stated that you wanted to spend more time with family, but then you're always doing blank that you don't want to spend that much time on. So while we are thinking of the theme that not all hours are created equal, we are then left with the question, well, what are we going to do about it? It's important to pause. It's important to stop, to reflect on where it is that we want to go in life, what it is that we want to do, where we do want our time to go, and then make some changes. So here are 5 tips for you. The first is just as I stated, rethink those priorities, rethink what's important to you right now. And my friends, listen in, especially if you're multitasking right now. Just because something is not important to you now or is not possible now doesn't mean it won't be later, right? Sometimes I struggle with that as far as wanting to do all the things and wanting to be all the things for all the people. But sometimes I have to shelve things again in order to be my best self for the people who I want to serve, whether it be an organization or my family or my business or myself. So sometimes you have to say no to something right now, but keep it in your back pocket or keep it on the top shelf and know that you can return to that at a later time after you've taken care of some priorities this moment. And that is the second tip, right? So the first is rethinking your priorities. And when you have things in order, the second tip is press pause on some things and know that you can press pause again to have it keep going when you need it. So remember, not all the things have to be done right now. So again, rethink your priorities, press pause on the things you need to. The third is what we began this episode with is get more sleep. And that is such an underrated thing. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I would say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's not a big deal. I can work and then work out and then go out and party and go back to work the next day as if nothing happened. And to be honest with you, when I was 21 to 26 ish or so, I was able to do that. But as I get not older, but wiser, I know that that doesn't suit me best, doesn't suit my energy level. And then it takes away the energy that I want to put into the areas where I do want to put more time on. It takes that away because I'm too tired to do anything well. So, really do try to have a good sleep routine, meaning the moments and not just the 2 or 3 moments, but like the 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed. Think about what that looks like and is it best serving you? If not, make some changes there. And not only the routine, but then the time at which you're going to bed. If you need to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning to work out, to work on you, whatever it is, then you really want to think about should you be staying up till 1 to watch that Netflix show, or should you go to sleep a little bit earlier? Everything, by the way, is connected. When we think of our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health, everything works together. And if we're not getting enough sleep, those other areas are going to deteriorate. So get more sleep. The fourth tip is to carve out time throughout your day to de stress. And I know that sounds really hard when your plate is already full of all the things that you have to get done, but it doesn't mean to schedule an hour and a half massage every single day. Now, an hour and a half massage once a month, lovely. Every day, probably not a possibility unless your name is JLo. And who even knows then, right? JLo, if you do that or if you don't do that, shout out and let me know. But if you are a regular person just like me, what you want to do is carve out these small moments where you can stop and take a breath, where perhaps instead of taking the short way to your car or the short way home, you take the way where you're going to be able to admire the changing leaves right now or admire the sunset on your way home. Perhaps it's putting a timer on your watch or on your phone that says just whatever you're doing, pause right now and breathe. Perhaps instead of bubbles flying on your screen when it's been idle for too long, perhaps you have pictures with positive quotes and affirmations to build yourself up, especially in the middle of a workday, or maybe even pictures of your family, again, to remind you of your why and the reason that you do all of the things that you do. So, whatever it is that is going to pick you up, even if it sounds like it's these minor things that aren't going to make a big difference, at the end of the day, they really do. And all of our stress accumulates. So we want to make sure that we are always taking these small moments to de stress or remind ourselves of our why, remind ourselves to stop and take a breath, remind ourselves to keep things in perspective so that we don't get so stressed out and overwhelmed, especially by the time that we get home and we see our families and then they get the worst of us instead of the best of us. And the last tip is to move your body. exercise. It doesn't have to be rigorous Olympic type exercising. As long as you're moving your body a couple of days during the week, again, everything is connected and it makes such a difference. And while one of my goals that I have not been reaching is getting up a little bit early to work out, not at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, just a little bit earlier to work out early, that may be something that you think about too if your schedule allows it to happen. Is instead of saying, I'll work out later and I'll work out later, and before you know it, more things get added to your plate or you're just so tired and then you don't get to it. That's what's happening in my life right now. Perhaps taking time out to schedule it as if you were scheduling a meeting for work. Schedule the time where you are going to work out and make it realistic. So if 5 o'clock in the morning doesn't work for you, make it realistic, put it at a time that does. And again, you don't need a whole 1 or 2 hours, especially if you have workout equipment at home. I mean, I can jump on the Peloton for 20 to 30 minutes and call it a day. And then I've at least checked that box off before everyone else in the house has gotten up. So I'm not perfect. It's something that I'm still working on. And perhaps these are things to have you reflect on the things that you can work on to, again, not just to be a better employee or a better colleague or a better leader, but to be a better mom, a better friend, a better daughter or son or cousin or sibling, a better person for you so that those you love are getting the best version of you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I invite you to join me on this short guided meditation. So right now, regardless of where you are or what you're doing, take a breath in through your nose and feel it as it goes towards the back of your throat before you release it, allowing your exhale to be longer than your inhale. As you pay attention to your breath, you might feel your mind becoming a little bit clearer, a little less foggy. And as this is happening, let's reflect on the following questions. Reflect on where you are in the time of year that you're listening to this. How has this year been for you? What were your goals, intentions, resolutions that you set at the beginning of the year? And where are you now with them? Have you met them? Are you almost there? Or have you fallen short? And remember that mindfulness has the aspect of letting judgment go. So don't get too hard on yourself if you haven't gotten close or if you've forgotten about these goals. Instead, focus your energy on what you can do today, what you can do this week, what you can do this month or beginning this very moment. What can you do for you to become a better version of you? Think about where you allow your time to go, where you're putting more focus on in different areas of your life. Think about if those areas of focus, if those pockets are suiting you. And if they're not, think about the changes that you want to make. And just as Rome was not built in one day, neither can all the goals be accomplished in one day. So just choose one thing. Choose the one thing that you can do today, right after you finish listening to this, in order to begin to make the positive change to be the best version of you. Have a great week. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. It would mean a ton if you took this moment to review the Free to Be Mindful podcast on the platform you catch your favorite shows. That quick and easy act lets me know what you enjoy, and it helps others find the podcast too. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you can listen along next week. In the meantime, I welcome you to catch me on social media at Counselor V de Jesus. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.